now.
Oh, there's the mic. There we go.
You got to cancel the spotlight video.
Where's that at?
Okay, I think it's good. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming and joining us on this beautiful Saturday. Of course, EMCON isn't over. We're still continuing and going strong. I'm really happy that you guys can join us today on this great program. I hope a lot of you fans out there who are into Netflix Castlevania, because we got a special treat for you guys. We have here Alejandra Reynoso. I pronounce your name right?
Alejandra. So I got the J in Spanish is like an 8 sound. Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. It's
and we
Spanish
have
for Alexandra.
All right, my fault. All right, and we also have Mark Torres came from the radio here. He's gonna be hosting. So let's get this thing started.
All right, so welcome everyone to the EMCON Animefest online. This is the 10th year, but the first year online due to the ongoing pandemic. But this is the Q&A with Castlevania actress Alejandra Reynoso. Say hi.
Hi, happy to be here.
So just letting everybody know in the Zoom chat, and I also believe this is also being live streamed on Facebook. If you guys have any questions, type it in and we will ask them. But essentially, it's just going to be us chatting with Alejandra. So I guess the first and most important question is, how did you get started on Castlevania?
I got started with Castlevania in a very traditional way. So I auditioned. An audition came into my agency. They thought that I fit the specs, which they send out with the characters that tell you a little bit about who the character is, maybe what they sound like, and what part they play in the show. And I submitted an audition like any other. And at the time, I was finishing up my last year at Stanford. So I sent in this audition from my college dorm room, just recorded it there, sent it in. Didn't hear back for a couple months, and then got an email saying, hey, we'd like to offer you the role of Sypha if you're interested.
Wow. So
Yeah.
Is it different for auditions for a non-voice acting role to a voice acting role?
I mean, primarily being that you're either on camera or you're not. And generally, you have the option of sending voiceover auditions in remotely. Nowadays, even on-camera auditions are remote because of the COVID situation and everyone's quarantined. But generally the split was you could either go into an agent's office, record your audition there, and they would send in the MP3. Or if you have good quality audio and a nice setup at home, you can record an audition remotely, send in that MP3. For on-camera auditions, you would often go into a casting office. And self-tapes weren't as prevalent as they are now, but things seem to be changing.
So when you get a character, when you get a role, and it's a voice acting role, because obviously an acting role is slightly different, but the acting is very important. But how do you decide what voices does the character represent?
Everyone has their own process. You know, a lot of voice actors will say if you get character art with your sides, a lot of times the voice will come from that. There wasn't any character art at the time when I got the Sypha sides in particular, but it's often it's kind of a process that happens on the job a little bit, or as you're working through your audition sides, and it really is just kind of whatever speaks to you. So we knew for sure that she had an accent when I was auditioning. That was in the specs. She has a Spanish accent. So going from there, it really was just, all right, this is what I think this character would sound like, just my take on it, right? So everyone's audition was their best take on whatever that was. And you see whatever speaks to the casting director, in this case, Meredith Lane, who's our casting director and is fabulous. And I can't say enough wonderful things about. She's also our voice director on the show. And then, you know, the production team, so Kevin Coldy and our writer Warren Ellis and Sam and Adam Dietz over at Powerhouse. And they just kind of decide what they think sounds like the character to them. And then a lot more of her development happened actually on the job. So once I had access to more scripts, and once we're getting in the room and you're working off other actors, a lot of that is a really organic process. So the character does evolve a lot through just working on it in the studio.
So with the Castlevania, because I know most of the time, at least in the old days, a lot of actors, voice acting used to all work together. But nowadays, all the voice actors are by themselves. So was with Castlevania, were you working with other people in the room? Or was it just like a script read?
So generally, it's not so much that it was that they used to be together and they're less so now. It really depends on what kind of production it is. So if you're doing a lot of ADR or dubbing, that's often just done individually because it's easier. It's technical. You're working to picture, and it's easier to get everyone's cues in. Even for original records or ensemble records, it's about who is where geographically, schedule-wise, can we get everyone together? Lots of directors, if it's prelay animation, which is not dubbing, where voice comes before picture, they try to get as many of the actors together in one room as possible because you just get so much more out of it. There's a dynamic there. You have someone to work off of. But there is still a lot of voiceover that is done individually, especially interactive work. So video games, you'll probably just be by yourself in a booth working with a director. For Castlevania in particular, they did try and have us work together as much as possible, but the cast is just so international that that wasn't always possible. For Sypha and Trevor in particular, we do have a lot of banter, and they wanted to try and keep that relationship as organic as possible. So Richard and I actually recorded all of our scenes together, not physically co-located. So he was either in Berlin or London or New York, and they would just connect us via a process called ISDN, which is basically like super voiceover Skype. And, I'm in the studio in LA, he's in a studio anywhere he happens to be in the world because he works a ton. And I could hear him in my headphones, he could hear me in his headphones, and we're working off of each other in real time. They're just recording us in different studios.
Wow.
But we did try to work together as much as possible. I was able to work with James, who voices Alucard, a couple times in person. And we were able to get season 2. We were able to get a session in where it was Richard, who plays Trevor, James, who voices Alucard, and myself all together in the same room. So that was a treat.
That's awesome. We
Yeah.
have a question in the chat already. So just reminding everybody who's watching, you can just type in your questions on the chat and I will read them. From Jude, it says, if a character art isn't available when you audition or start developing the character, do you feel that the anime artists use your voice as part of the visual of the character?
Yeah, so I mean, if the art is not available, it really is you using your imagination, right? And so much of it is that. So they do tell you some of the main character points, right? So, they're brave or they're outspoken, or maybe they're introverted and they're shy. And so if the art isn't available, you're just working basically, whatever inner workings they've provided you. And that can vary. And then also a lot of that is filled in by your own experience, right? So as an actor, you take a lot of your own lived experience and you see how that affects the character. And that's also why you get so many different interpretations for a single character. Every actor's take is going to be fairly different because it's colored by your own experience. So as far as then it going the other way, an artist using your voice to influence the character designs. I don't know how often that happens. It's not necessarily a one-to-one thing. It depends. I know that Sam, because Sam, our director, was in charge of the character designs for the main trio, definitely, and Dracula. He had a pretty clear vision for what his characters were going to look like. He developed that over a period of time. And Sypha, I think, was always going to look the way she did. I just don't know if it was available at the time that I was auditioning or if they just decided not to make it available. I'm not entirely clear on that. But I guess whatever I was doing just happened to match up with however they envisioned her. And it worked out for me.
So it's actually interesting you mentioned about the audition process and bringing your own personal experiences to the role of a character. One of the
Right.
things I've always found is that sometimes voice actors get like the bottom of the barrel when it comes to acting. Like, oh, you can do wacky voices, or you can do, oh, I can be a voice actor. But really, I find that it's more difficult to convey your emotions just by your voice as opposed to using your entire body. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so when you're working on camera or on stage, you have the benefit of people seeing everything that's going on, right? So any minute movement in your face, like as humans, we're really good at generally reading other people. We interact with people all the time, and 90% of the cues we take are visual, right? So a lot of the communication and a lot of the story comes from that. And 90% of communication is unspoken. I might be flubbing the statistics on that, so don't quote me on it. But generally speaking, you take cues from, like, for example, I speak with my hands a lot when I'm explaining things. But you take lots of these visual cues. And when you're working just with your voice, you're not able to necessarily convey as much if you're not pushing a little bit more. So, you still want to give a lived experience, a human experience, and an honest performance, because that is still what people connect to. But you have to do it using only your voice. So it is a learned skill. And at the same time, I think the fact that some characters are so wacky and so out of this world, it speaks more to the skill of a really connected actor, that you can ground an experience or a character that is just so foreign to people, and still connect that human element or that emotional element, because people still really connect to animated shows. It still affects you as a human, and affects you on an emotional level. So yeah, I think a lot of people sometimes write off voice actors in particular as, oh, you're those people that make those, wacky voices, and or I can do a funny voice, So yeah, I think it depends. And then it also speaks to the range of a voice actor in terms of being able to do something more grounded, which you see a lot in video games, which are very cinematic and very grounded, and more of a naturalistic performance. And then on the other end, you get things like, Looney Tunes, or even Adventure Time, which is a very particular flavor. So yeah.
All right, so we have another question from the chat. It is from Kelly. It says, speaking of video games, Castlevania was originally a video game. Was it a requirement to play the game before getting hired for the role?
Okay, so I always say I'm going to make people very sad when I say this, but I haven't yet played the video game. So I think that answers the question, that no, it wasn't a requirement. But I am planning to do so. And I just recently got a Switch, so like that's a big step for me already. But I do plan on getting my hands on some Castlevania games and doing that. And a lot of people have been telling me, the first time you play, you have to stream it, or put it on Twitch. So it is coming, and no, it wasn't a requirement. But Sam and Adam, our compositing director over at Powerhouse, the Dietz Bros, are huge Castlevania fans. They played the games growing up. They know so much about it. I've learned a lot just from them. They've put in all of these great Easter eggs and found ways to bring in things that they loved in a really honest and organic way that serves the story. So I think it was a good combination, because you had Warren, who our amazing writer, creator, who hadn't actually played the games, but just dove deep into the lore and the mythology of the world, the whole Castlevania universe, and came at it from the perspective of just wanting to write a great story and great, well-rounded characters, and we had that opportunity, now that we were going beyond these little 8-bit sprites, to really flesh out who these characters were and the stories that existed in this like crazy, amazing universe. So we had that perspective, where we had just this amazing storyteller trying to tell a great story with great characters. And then we have these amazing artists who so loved and respected the source material that you just got this amazing show.
So one of the things I want to actually mention is that you've also done, you've done video game voiceovers, done the Castlevania series, and you also done Winx.
Right.
Now, with Winx, it was already, the animation was already done, and then you saw it afterwards. The Castlevania was voice first, and then you did the voice, and then they did the animation, and then the video game. So can you tell us a little bit of the differences between the three?
So the nice thing about Winx is we actually got to do a little bit of everything, because seasons 1 through 4 were already done. The Italian animation existed. And so that was dubbing, that was ADR. We did it to picture. But then seasons 5 and 6, Nickelodeon produced as original records. So those we actually got into the studio and recorded before there was picture. And then our performance became the performance that people were dubbing to in other languages. So we got to do it one way and then the other way on Winx. So we did get a little bit of both. And then with Castlevania, you're right, it was prelay. So we did voice and then picture, that came later. And with video games, the funny thing is, because I don't really play video games, you know, I do it and then it goes out there. And I've never seen or heard any of my performances on a video game. So my whole experience was that is the time that I spent in the booth, you know, and you're doing like death rattles and all these barks and things. So they are all very different. They also require things technically of you that are very different. With prelay, like we do on Castlevania or the 5th and 6th seasons of Winx Club, you have a lot of freedom because you're not constrained by time necessarily, or timing in particular. You know, you're laying it down for the first time, and so you're just living in that scene and in those characters. When you're dubbing, when you're matching picture, you are limited to the amount of lip flap that you have, right? It has to fit and it has to match. And then also when you're dubbing, usually you're coming to it from another language, right? So the timing is going to be different, inflection is going to be different. And so you have your writers and your producers who are on hand there in the studio, and sometimes they're changing lines on the fly just to make things work and to match timing. And sometimes you have to stretch things. And so you still want to give a great performance and you still want it to connect with people, but you are also trying to match a very technical limitation that's placed on you in regards to timing. And so there is this great freedom in doing prelay that I really love. And then with video games, they're just very vocally stressful because you are having to do lots of death rattles and barks and yelling and shouts. And so that's more of it's a marathon, not a sprint. And generally they try to load the session so that you get really vocally stressful things at the end, so you don't completely blow your voice and then you can't do the session. But it's an interesting mixed bag.
Speaking of, how many times have you died differently? Is it like, oh, you die this way, you die that way, and you have to make it a different inclination each time?
Yeah, I have no idea how many different ways I've died. But it's interesting because, okay, like now you're falling out of a helicopter. Okay, now you're falling out of a helicopter and you're on fire. It's like this many meters off the ground, or, you know, so there's a thing of like, okay, you're on fire now, and this is like the 2-second version. You're on fire. This is the 5-second version. You got electrocuted. You got like, it's just all of these really violent ways to die, and it's like very specific to what's happening. I really enjoy, so like Kari Walgren, she'll post on Instagram little video clips of her in the booth doing like death rattles for video games, like little select clips. And I've seen her like fully just waterboard herself because she's like supposed to be drowning or like gurgling, like they've slit her throat and she's gurgling. And so she'll just be like downing water from a water bottle and like trying to gurgle multiple times. So yeah, it's interesting. And you get to go home and you're alive and fine.
So let's talk about young Alejandra.
Okay.
Was she ever, is this what she wanted to do? Did you always wanted to be an actress? Were you watching cartoons and saying, man, I would love to work with these people?
I loved cartoons growing up. You know, and growing up, you know, we didn't have streaming, right? So we were the wake up Saturday morning early to catch your favorite cartoons and to watch all this dubbed anime. But early on, it wasn't a thing where it connected for me, where I saw that and I thought, I'm going to do that. You know, I loved it, but it was never a thing where I thought, oh, I'm going to do it. And it wasn't until high school that this became a career option for me. So, you know, I grew up in LA and I did commercials as a kid, and my agency had a voiceover department as well. And when I was in high school, I got an internal referral. And basically my agent, my commercial agent, told the voiceover department, hey, I have, you know, this client, she's really great. I think you should try her out for VO. And the first I heard about it was the voiceover department being like, oh, here, audition for this thing. And that ended up being G.I. Joe Renegades, which was the first job I booked. And I got to the studio that day and I had no idea that I'd actually booked a job. I thought, this is a callback for an audition. I'm coming in so they can decide if they like what I'm doing and see if they're going to book me. And nope, turns out it was a real job. And I got into the booth and I was standing next to Kevin Michael Richardson.
I know him.
And so, I mean, that's like, you know, baptism by fire, right? You know, you get in there and you're seeing like these veterans of the voiceover world just completely killing it. And it's just amazing to see what they do and how tight their craft is and how much joy they have in the work and how much joy they elicit in the other people. You know, like the people standing in the control room on the other side of the glass, watching him and listening to him, were getting so much joy out of the work he was doing. And that was just like a, you know, mind blown moment for me. And that's kind of where, you know, I'm going to do VO really started.
How is it to try to keep your fangirl self in while you're still doing the job?
Well, to be fair, that one, I was still like, oh, like, I guess I'm doing the work. So at the time, it's like you're enjoying all of that, but you're also like, oh, I gotta not mess this up. And you're like, you're a teenager, you're in high school, and it's like at that point in your life where like you hate standing up in front of people to give presentations, and you feel like you're like, everyone's like watching you and waiting for you to mess up, and you're just awkward and like really, you know, insecure. And so it was more like, okay, like just don't mess up. And then you enjoy it after the fact. I had more of a like, don't fangirl moment on my first session of Castlevania. Because for anyone that follows me on social media, you might know that I love Stargate SG-1. And I love Master Braytak, who is played by Tony Amendola, who incidentally is my grandfather on the show. He's the elder speaker. And I was in the booth recording my very first session, and James happened to be there. He was recording at the time, I believe. And I'm standing in the room. I'm on mic. You know, there's the big glass in front of you. You can't hear anything. And I see someone walk into the control room. And I'm like, oh, he looks very familiar. And he walks across the room and sits down on the couch. And he sits down, and finally, like, he's facing forward. I'm like, oh, it's Master Braytak. I know exactly who this is. And so, like, I'm standing in there and, like, you know, trying to get through my final few cues before he comes in. He was going to record his scenes with me. And they're like, okay, great, let's take a break. And I'm like, oh, don't fangirl. Be a professional. Like, he's a colleague, you know, like, don't make this weird for him at work. Like, he came here to work. Don't make this weird. And so they take a break, and he comes in and he's setting up. And I feel like I should just say something so that I'm not thinking about it. And I was just like, hi, Tony, I'm Alejandra. And I introduced myself, and it's like, you know, I really loved your work on Stargate SG-1. You know, I grew up watching it with my dad, and he was so sweet, so kind. And he was like, oh, you know, that's great. You know, you don't know how many times I hear that, you know, dads grew up watching it with their sons or daughters, and you know, that he loves that. And, you know, we start getting set up, and he's like, you know what, let's take a picture. And I was like, such a gift to me. So we're in the booth, and he's like, all right, you know, give someone your phone, we'll take a picture. And then afterwards, you know, he said, hey, you know what, I want to send your dad a signed Braytak picture. So, you know, give me your dad's information and I'll send it to him. And he did. And my dad was like, what? So yeah, that was really sweet of him. And you know, he's a wonderful person, and we've kept in touch since then. And yeah, I mean, I can't say enough nice things about Tony.
That's so awesome. I guess it doesn't, because they always say don't meet your heroes, but I guess this one actually worked out.
right? This is one where it's like, meet your hero and actually introduce yourself. Yeah, no, but I mean, he's an amazing, amazing human and so talented. And I went and watched him. He was doing a play in Pasadena like a couple years ago, right after we'd done that. And so I went and watched him and he was great. And so yeah, this
So
one worked out.
So let's see. We have some questions in the chat. So let's see. From Sam Sunder. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. Samsonder. Besides Sypha, who is your favorite character and why?
I always talk about him, but Isaac, who is voiced by Ade McCormack. I also know he's a fan favorite, but he's great. And the funny thing is that like Ade as a person in real life is the sweetest, kindest, most like, he's like a button of a human being. Like he's just an adorable person. Like I have so much love for Ade as a human because you will not find a nicer, sweeter person. There's just, honestly, the Castlevania family is just filled with great people. But then he turns on the Isaac thing and there's just so much gravitas to his voice and there's weight to it. And, you know, like Isaac, there's a lot going on as a character. Like his backstory is heartbreaking and tragic and so compelling. And there's just so much happening. And you talk about, you know, oh, it's harder to communicate something using just your voice. But from a small interaction to a major interaction that he has on the show, you can hear all of that story, that there's so much more happening inside of him that isn't being said. And Warren, our writer, often talks about how, you know, as we've gone through the show and as he said in on sessions, our performances have so shaped what the characters have turned into and things that come up in script or what happens later. And Ade is very much one where there's just so much happening that you just feel it kind of vibrating under the surface, that it really just was used to great effect on the latest season. So I would say Isaac, but I love all of the characters, but if I had to just like pinpoint one, Isaac.
All right, fair enough. We have more questions in the chat. All right, so Brian says, and so it's a long one. I just want to say that all of my friends really love the series. It combines the dynamic movement of newer animation with the beautiful detailed art of older animations. We all love your characters. She is both badass and adorable. We love her banter with Trevor and Alucard. How do you feel about the reception of the series and Sypha in particular has had so far?
Oh, I mean, you know, when this first started really picking up steam, I was absolutely floored because, you know, I wasn't super familiar with the property before getting involved with it. And you never know when something is going to be popular or not. Like you go into it and you put, you know, all this love into the show and you see other creatives on the show, like putting their heart and soul into something and you hope that it works out and that it's well received, but you never know. At the same time, and I've said this before, reading those scripts as they would come in, seeing the people involved and how much passion they put into the series, it kind of felt like a no-brainer. Like there's no way this wasn't going to be as big as it ended up being because the people behind it were just so honest in their passion and they're so talented. So I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful that it was received the way it was. And then especially for Sypha, I felt so embraced by the Castlevania fan community, which was huge, you know, and it's just such a beloved series. And there wasn't necessarily a lot known about her. Like we have her backstory and stuff, but you know, it's not like that Sprite had a voice, you know, there wasn't necessarily something established there because you often get pretty connected to the first thing you hear. And I wasn't necessarily having to change people's ideas about who she was or what she sounded like. I know that there is some voiceover in later games for her, but I just think our version of her is very different and it's gone in a different direction. And I'm so grateful that people really embraced her the way that they did. And I'm just so grateful I get to play a character like this and that Warren has been just so like generous as a writer. And I remember like reading scripts as I would get them and I would be like messaging him in real time as I would get to different parts and being like, oh, this is funny. Or like, you know, and So yeah, it's been a real treat.
So you mentioned the audition process. How long has it been when you started the audition process for Sci-Fi to when it actually aired? Like how much time was it between that?
So I auditioned in 2016, and it was like a couple months before I knew I had the job, and then a few more months before I was in the studio for the first time working on that first season. And then I believe, was it season 1 came out in 2017? Correct me if I'm wrong. Everything's just like blurring together. And especially these last 6 months, it feels like, how many years has it been? But yeah, so in the grand scheme of like it starting up, it didn't take too long from audition to studio. It was a few months. I believe I auditioned, I want to say beginning of May of 2016.
Wow. So we've had we've done different panels with other voice actors, and they always say that when you do an audition, you just do it and forget about it because you never
Yeah.
know. So that's an accurate description.
Yeah, that is 100%. But for me, because again, I was a couple months out from graduating from university. It's like a time in my life that I'm very like aware of, and I can remember where that happened. But yeah, I mean, auditions come in, you do them, you send them out, you forget it ever happened. Because it's the only way to live a sane life in this industry. And I've told people there are some projects that are going to come into your life that you are going to want more than others, that are going to speak to you personally, and or are going to be maybe the revival of a show that you loved, or a show that you currently love, and they're maybe adding new characters, and you're like, oh, I would love to be on that. And so there are some things that are going to weigh a little bit more. And, it's definitely a learned skill to be like, all right, I did that. It's gone. It's out of my hands. And you have to learn how to just enjoy the audition for what it is. Like this may be your only and last time playing this character. So enjoy that moment and send it off. And hopefully someone else enjoys it. And if it was meant to be yours, it's going to be yours. And if not, we grieve and we move on. Yeah.
More questions from the chat. From Pat. Have you ever dressed up or cosplayed as a character you have voice acted for?
I haven't, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. I've seen what cosplayers do. You guys are talented people, and you're really good at sewing and putting things together. And I'm not going to say I can't do it, but it's definitely, it's going to be a journey for me. So I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it's something I definitely want to try and do. And just because I'm so impressed by and inspired by all these cosplayers that I've seen that have shared their cosplays with me. And you guys, I mean, like, you shape your wigs, you color your wigs, I've seen people like put together props so it looks like they have little like ice orbs or little flames going. And it's just, it's mind-blowing. So yeah, I mean, I'm probably not going to be at that level anytime soon, but I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Okay, let's see. More questions from the chat. So let's see. Shiny Evolution says, I'm going to say that you did very well in this series, but any plans for the future if you're voice acting as another character in a different series? So what other plans do you have or do you want to do in the future?
What other plans? So I want to say that there are more things. There isn't currently anything I can talk about. There are a lot of NDAs in this industry. But I mean, I'm always auditioning for stuff. That's it's your life as an actor, and then hoping that you connect with a project that needs you and that you are going to slot into. And I mean, you want all of the jobs, but you cannot do all of the jobs. And then also the voiceover community in particular is very special in that it's one of the only sectors of acting and entertainment where someone might legitimately see an audition and think, oh, you know what, I'm not necessarily right for this, but I know someone who would be, and at the same time, like, while you do grieve certain characters that you get attached to, if a friend of yours is like up for something and then like they get it, like you're still excited, you know, and it's still like a major thing because you know what that battle feels like and what like the pain of, oh, like is that thing going to come back? Is that project that I really loved going to pan out? So, I mean, I'm always auditioning. I'm in the trenches, and there is more coming. When, I cannot say because, you know, things take a long time. But, you know, whenever I can talk about things, I will. And hopefully you guys hear me in something else very soon.
So you like not getting sued, basically, is the answer.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anyone who makes sport of it?
Let's see. More questions from the chat. Let's see. From Kelly. I love the series. It's one of the best shows on Netflix to binge from season 1 to season 3. I kind of feel season 3 was more of a filler, but it is still entertaining. Can you tell me which season you have had the most fun in and which season, in your opinion, is the best season?
I mean, I think it gets better and better. Like everything that you see, it just ups the ante more, which is crazy to say. Like when you go season to season, you think like, oh, how are they going to top this? And then they do. They've all been really fun to work at. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but I really can't say, oh, this was my favorite season or that was my favorite episode, because I've really genuinely enjoyed the process. And then just as a character, you know, the characters have grown and they've changed from day one. So I really can't just say, oh, this was my favorite season or this was my favorite episode, because they're so different. I really love that you get to see more characters in the third season. At the same time, you know, I always say that I really loved the scene between Alucard and Dracula in season 2, where Alucard is having to kill his father and come to terms with that, and that whole interchange, you know, where I was gonna say Graham, where Dracula, Graham didn't kill anyone, want to kill anyone, where, you know, Dracula finally realizes what he's doing, and, you know, the my boy, I'm killing my boy. That one gets me every time. That was really powerful, so that stays with me, and you know, when I think about that, I'm like, oh, season 2, but then, you know, you think about all the things that happened in season 3, and for me, it doesn't feel like filler. It feels like a really masterful use of story and of character that Warren has employed here, because you get to see your heroes having that dark night of the soul, and it seems like everything is going wrong for the good guys, right? For the guys that should be winning and should be on top. And you finally see, for me personally, seeing Sypha have that kind of that doubt start to seep in, because from the beginning she was like 100%, we're gonna do this, we're gonna win, no need to worry, I got this, boys. And suddenly she has this doubt, and she doesn't know what went wrong, and she missed things that she shouldn't have missed, and they had very real world consequences. And so you're seeing your heroes come to terms with the fact that they didn't win, or they didn't see it coming, or, you know, the goal was to defeat Dracula. We were going to defeat the evil in the world, and everything was going to be great. And then it wasn't. And they got complacent, and they got, dare I say, cocky. And things happened, and it's completely reshaped their worldview. And for Sypha, it's the first time that she's really had this moment of, I can fail, or it's not cut and clear, right? It's not cut and dry. There's a possibility that bad things happen, and I dropped the ball, and I have to live with the consequences of that, which, you know, is Lindenfeld. So for me, I mean, I think season 3, there's a lot of food for thought and discussion, and I really enjoyed that. So I think they just keep upping the ante.
Personally, I felt that the banter in season 3 was the best between you and Trevor. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So when you get the scripts, is there any point in time, since you're so immersed in the character, you're like, maybe she shouldn't say that, or maybe she shouldn't do this, or you just take whatever's on the page and you're like, how am I going to interpret this the best way I can?
to be fair, there is nothing there. There's nothing Warren sends you that you feel like, oh, the character wouldn't say this. Because he is so immersed in the world and the characters themselves. There's no way he'd put something in the script where it's like, oh, this character would, like, he would be the first one to tell you, no, this character wouldn't say it. And he's talked about his writing process and saying that, you know, he hears them and he hears us, he hears our voices as them in his head. And it's like, yeah, this is clearly what they're going to say. And he sits in on all of the sessions. He listens in on everything. And, you know, he talks about after every session or after every new actor was cast, he would go back and rewrite for the actor, or he would listen to what we were doing and, you know, things he liked, he would push the character more in that direction. Wow. And so I remember, yeah, I mean, like a lot of the banter and stuff, I'd be messaging him and talking about how funny he was and how much I loved it. And I remember him saying, well, yeah, you know, like I realized, you know, early on, like you were doing some funny things with her and it would have been such a waste to not push it in that direction. So I was really excited that we got to do more of that, because I feel like Sypha gets to cross lines between established character archetypes in really fun ways. So, you know, she's not just like the fun, serious one that like demeans everyone. She's like, she at the same time, like she gets to be the funniest or the silliest person in the room and the smartest person in the room at the same time, you know, depending on the scene. But she's not just one thing, you know, she can be sweet and naive, and then she can also be just smart and a badass, and she can also just be silly and you know, go with the flow and enjoy the world that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think you could enjoy, you know, like everything is a lot of the time just very dark, and she brings this sort of levity and light. And then that's also why it's so interesting at the end of season 3 to see her light dimmed a little bit and to see her doubting the way she's operated in this world. So yeah, with Warren, you're just like, yeah, let's do this. But I want everything that you wrote. Let's do that.
More questions from the chat. From Brian says, do you think Sypha would have been able to see through the twins and would have been able to warn Alucard if she was there?
Okay, personally, I think so. And this might also be just the Sypha and me being like, yeah, I got this handled, and then another Lindenfeld happens, right? So who knows? Maybe she would have been like, we're all best friends, and but personally, and I mean, hindsight is 20/20, right? But personally, I think so. I think for her, she is very protective in a way of Alucard, and especially after, you know, the end of season 2, where she's saying like, you know, it needed to be done, but you can mourn the man too, and she sees how much Alucard has suffered. At the same time, I, along with a lot of you, have very strong feelings about Trevor and Sypha rolling away and leaving him the castle. But we'll chalk it up to love is blind, and so they were in the haze of love and rolling on down the road. But I personally think that if she was around, she definitely would have had her boy Alucard's back, and things would have been very different. And if anyone tries that with him again, I think she would be, very angry and would be very reactive. So yeah, personally, I think she would have stepped up for Alucard. Unfortunately, she wasn't there, and that wasn't the case. But like I said, everyone had their dark night of the soul moment. So yeah.
All right, so let's see. Another question from the chat from Helen. Have you watched, all right, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, so apologize, Seis Manos on Netflix, and would you be interested in working with the cast?
Okay, so something you need to know about me. I grew up watching soap operas with my mom, and Angelica Vale plays Garcia, the police officer. So yes, I would very much be interested in working with the cast. I mean, these are amazing artists of Mexican television, and so I would very much be interested. I mean, of course, I love what the teams at Powerhouse are putting out. I think they're really pushing the envelope with what Western animation can do, because for so long we've seen that there was a bit of this split, right? And like for the longest time, like Japan has known that animation is not a genre, it's a medium, and it's just another way to tell stories, and it doesn't limit the kind of stories you can tell. And for a long time in Western animation, it was more so seen as a children's medium, and so it was limited in the types of stories you could tell. And something like Castlevania didn't get a chance to be told for a long time. Our producer Kevin Coldy has been working on getting this made for over a decade, and it took having the right people get together and say, you know what, we're going to take a chance on this, and there is an audience for this. People do want to see something like this. So I think seeing things like Castlevania and Seis Manos, and then they have Gods and Heroes coming up, they're really pushing that you can have other stories told. Western animation can tell other stories, and I think they're doing a great job, and so I support everything they're doing, and you guys should too. They're great, and then they're just such talented people, so I obviously can't say enough nice things about them, but yeah, I'm all for it.
One of my favorite voice actors of all time would be Frank Welker, and like he can do so many things, but one of the things I always find interesting, just like what Mel Blanc had done before him, is that he was able to do multiple voices, talking to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you're looking forward to try? Because I don't think you've ever done two characters at the same time interacting with each other yet.
I have, actually.
Oh.
In Winx Club, I did Flora, and I also did her pixie, Chata.
Oh.
And so there were a couple times where Flora was talking to Chata, and instead of switching back and forth, we just did, I was talking to myself. So that has happened. And then in audiobooks, I've done some audiobooks, and in that, you're all the characters, and you're the narrator, and you're reading it linearly. You're not going back and doing, okay, I'm going to record all this character and all that character, because we'll never finish. So yeah, you're reading through, and you're narrator, and then you're this character, and then, and you're that character talking to the other characters. So yeah, it has happened.
All right. More questions from I can't believe you were both those characters. I did not know that.
Yeah. So I was the fairy and her pixie.
I love that show, actually. Let's see. Moving on. More questions from the chat. From Pat, if you can own anything from the Castlevania series besides the castle, what would it be?
Besides the castle, isn't it like you break it, you buy it? So, just kidding. I did not break it. What would I want? Anything from the series. You know what? I want the Trevor and Sypha dolls that Alucard made. I want my my handmade dolls. I feel like that's the thing. I should just talk to James and be like, James, I need you to make me some dolls. That's what I would want, actually. I think they're really cute, and I think Sam has probably tweeted out about this, but there was an alternate version where they were little turnips. There was a little Trevor turnip and a Sypha turnip that Alucard found in his little turnip garden that he had outside the castle. But yeah, the dolls.
Well, if you put it out there, as you just did, I'm sure someone at a convention will be happy to provide you with a doll.
Oh my gosh. I've seen people, doing it like to scale with like the ladle arm and like the buttons, and yeah. So there is a talented fan community out there.
Another question from the chat. Kelly says, do you think there will be any prequels that will go more into depth of the Belmont family and the interactions with Dracula's wrath against humanity?
I don't know. I have no idea. And generally, just in general, like the voice actor is always the last to know about anything. So I have no idea. That would be up to many people above me in this hierarchy. So I have no idea, but I think there are a lot of interesting stories there to be told, definitely. So I mean, I guess it's also up to the fan community and what they push for, and what our creatives want to do.
Well, you should be like, I want a Cypher series. That's all you should be like. I want a Cypher series.
Right? Just ask for a Cypher series. That's
Yeah,
yes,
every
that's
time
what
you
I
show
want.
up to work. Every time you show up to work. How you doing? Can I have a Cypher series? That'll get right in there.
Right? Yeah, I'll get a t-shirt made so I can just walk into the studio and be like, guys, this is start campaigning.
All right, so we are almost out of time. So let's do some technical stuff. So if people want to get into voice acting, what do they need? What is the basics that they need to start voice acting?
I mean, the basics start with acting, right? If you haven't taken an acting class, start with an acting class and start seeing if you actually like doing it, and working on your craft and your technique, and learning how to craft a character and how to bring life to a character. So always start there. If you've gotten to that point and your craft is on point, and like, this is what I want to do, then you start looking into more of the technical of it, right? So if it's specifically voiceover, I always say, look at the work of people that you admire, and just, for purposes of developing, emulate some of that work. This also isn't a thing where, like, a lot of people will say, like, I can do a really good SpongeBob, or I can do a really good X, Y, or Z. And it's like, that's great. That's a great place to start. It's a great way to exercise your skill of matching voices and maybe trying to do other character voices. But there is already a SpongeBob, right? There is already a Scooby-Doo, right? Like, Tom Kenny and Frank Welker exist. So what do you bring to this space? What do you as a person bring that no one else has? And that's why I always talk about your own unique lived experience is going to affect a character. So it's not about trying to be the next Tara Strong or the next Grey Griffin, right? It's about, what do you bring to this character? So I, as a quick plug, because this is a huge topic and I can talk about it for hours, always plug my podcast, which is Rolling Wild with Alejandra Reynoso. You can find that on my website. You can find that on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. And I talk about all of these things. And I also bring on other voice actors to give you guys more information than I could on my own. So.
And that's another thing for social media time. So where can people find you? Where can people contact you? Where can people hire you? That's important.
So I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. You can go to my website. It's just AlejandraReynoso.com. And all of my information is there. My representation, social media, everything. So if you need to look up anything about me, www.AlejandraReynoso.com.
Including the Rolling Wild podcast is on the site. So in case you're having trouble finding it, just go there and it's all there.
Yes.
We have a last question. I might get a couple more in. Another question from Brian. If you have time for a funny question, a Cypher versus Leonore in a snark-off.
Cypher. I think Cypher could take Lenore.
All right. So let's see. We have, I think, about 5-6 minutes left. So I want to ask you, I want to put you on the spot. So at the very end, if you can do a line for us, Cypher's voice, you can do that for the fans. It'd be awesome. But I just want to give you time to do your final thoughts on the whole process. What's your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Which process in particular?
Well, the process of acting, the process of voice acting, because I know it's two different things, and your experience as a person. What is your thoughts of the world at the time right now?
That's big stuff.
That's why I gave you 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, as I guess the combination of things there. One, as an actor, as a voice actor, you work in an industry that affects people and touches people, and works from and should work from a place of empathy, right? And the only way to connect with people is to be open, to be honest, and to come to things with an open heart. And it's funny, we always also talk about like villains in shows, right? And how do you play a villain, and how do you play a hero? And a lot of actors will tell you that if you're playing a villain right, the villain is never the villain in their own story, right? And so that's definitely an exercise in empathy. So you do, as an actor, learn how to see the world through that lens. And I think we've come to a place in history where, well, one, I think a lot of people are really fighting to have that empathy come to the forefront. And it's not just a thing where you can, sit on your hands and wait for change to happen. And I think it's important for people to exercise and a lot of people will bristle this, but it is a constitutional right to protest. It is a constitutional right to speak your mind and ask the government for redress, right? It is a right to be able to gather and demand change. So I will say that at this point in time, there is a lot happening, and I think it's for a combination of reasons, but also that we've been experiencing multiple generational events spanning the globe, whether it be a pandemic or global movements. There are so many things that have happened in the last 6 months that could be considered the major defining event of your generation or of a decade or of someone's lifetime, and they've just been coming one after the other. And the fact that people have been inside and isolated for so long, I think, has also pushed a lot of the change and reaction that people are seeing right now. But I think it's important. I think it's good that people are talking and that they're speaking up. And I think it's good that people feel empowered to do so, because, the fact that we live in a free country and the fact that we live in what is supposed to be, the greatest experiment in democracy, on the face of the planet, should be working for the people. And I think that people are now demanding that that be the case. And I hope that for anyone who is feeling discouraged and just so frustrated right now, I'm right there with you. And I hope that things do change this time, and that we see what this country is supposed to be and what this country is supposed to stand for. I hope we see that happen. I've been watching Emmanuel Acho's videos, and in his second episode, this quote came up where it says, "America, the land that has yet to be." And so I think it's important that we remember what this country was founded on, and we try to make good on that promise, because I don't think that's happened yet. And I think that there's a lot of room here to make something really amazing, where people do feel like, you know what, I'm heard, and this is the land of the free, right? And I think that means everyone. So until it's everyone.
I get some applause right there. Very well done.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have less than a minute. So can you give us a sign off as Cypher, if you would?
Sure. I'll give you a quick one that I like to do, which is the investigators.
So I want to thank you so much for being a guest on this Q&A panel for the EMCON Anime Fest. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Make sure you guys follow her. Much continued success. You have really brought your voice brought such a well-roundedness to already well-rounded character. It gave it that next level, and I really appreciate your work and your hard work, because it is hard work. It's not just you do the line and you go on. You have to repeat it. You have to refine it. It's a very it's an amazing craft, and I appreciate your hard work for it. Thank you so much. I guess that is it. So make sure you like us on Facebook, check us out on Instagram, follow the EMCON Anime Fest. There will be more panels going on. I know that on I believe the 10th of July, they're going to have another panel with actor Larry Kenny. He's a voice actor for Lionel of the Thundercats, so he'll be with us. So make sure you join us on that. Go to East Metal Info. eastmetal.info is the library's website, and check out the EMCON Anime Fest, and check out my show, It Came From the Radio. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And Alejandra, the East Meadow Public Library staff wants to thank you. We really appreciate it. And if you're ever in New York, let us know.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I would love to check out the library. Like my public library, my local public library was a big part of my life growing up. So I'm so excited we got to do this, and support your local public library, guys.
All right, guys, that is it. So have a good one.
Thank you